Hello, everybody. It is Monday, and Mondays being what they are, I wanted to have a fun conversation today, but it's still relevant to agile coaching. It's relevant to agile coaching, it's relevant to leadership, it's relevant to all kinds of things. Uh, and it's about a horse. This is my favorite story about a horse, the most important horse in all of psychology. And this horse's name is Clever Hans. It is this horse. So what? Why was Hans clever? This is a really cool thing. This was a very, very early 1900s, right around 1903, 1904, and um, and clever Hans was a German horse that was paraded around Germany. Would take him into a town square, and the owner of Clever Hans would say, "My horse is so clever. He can do all kinds of arithmetic. He can understand German. He can do all these cool things, and I'm going to prove it to you." And he would. He would march the horse into the town square, and people would gather around, and he would ask him different questions. So he would say, "Hans, what is 3 plus 5?" And Hans would answer that the answer is 8. He would answer by clicking his hoof on a little wooden box that was put in front of him. So, uh, so he would do this, and then the crowd would cheer and have a good time because horses doing math is kind of fun, and he would get the answer right like 89% of the time. That's better than I do on math, right? So it was pretty cool, and he was kind of a crowd favorite. So this got a lot of attention, and the German Board of Education at the time went, "Wow, people are having a lot of fun with this. We can't have that." So they put a committee together, and they put a committee together of 13 people, including cavalry officers, because of their experience with horses, and veterinarians and zoologists and teachers, all these other people. And they said, "Okay, let's have this commission go out and determine how this is happening, what's going on." And so they went out and they observed this show with Clever Hans, and they tried a couple of things and they checked a couple of things and decided that there were no tricks involved and promptly gave up figuring it out. There's probably a lesson in there about bureaucratic committees, but that's for another day. So there was a gentleman named Oscar Funsk, who he was a psychologist and biologist at the time. The field of psychology hadn't been really formally established yet, so a little bit of vagueness on his title. But he wasn't ready to let it go, right? It wasn't enough for him to say that there wasn't a trick. He wanted to be able to explain how it happened. So the commission handed off the investigation to him, and he decided to do a couple more experiments. And so what did he do? The first thing he did was he said, "Well, what if someone else asks the question? Does Clever Hans still get the answer?" And they found out he did. Right? So it's not fraud. It's not something that the owner is doing. Right? There is really a thing happening here. And then he in addition to getting other people up, he tried to isolate the questioner and the horse. Is it someone in the crowd who's doing something? No, that's not it either. He's still getting these questions right. And then he tried a couple other things, including using blinders on the horse to avoid other cues, which also didn't help. And then here's the one that was interesting. He asked, or excuse me, he had the handler asked the horse a question that the handler did not know the answer to. And then Hans started getting questions wrong. And this is really interesting, right? So he did quite a few more tests, and what he eventually discovered was this: Hans was incredibly clever. And if any of you out there own horses, this will surprise you not a bit. Hans was incredibly clever, but not in that he could understand German or that he could do math. Instead, what he was doing was watching very, very subtle changes in posture in facial expressions. These are so subtle that the person who was doing it didn't even know they were doing it, right? So if Oscar Funk would get up there and ask a question, he was trying to not show anything, but it didn't matter, right? Because as human beings, there are all kinds of unconscious things that happen. And in particular, later investigation found that as the horse approached the right answer, the horse was actually able to read tension that was being built up inside of the posture of the person as he was approaching the right answer. And then once he hit the right answer, that tension would shift subtly and he would stop. There you go. We have the right answer. So this is fascinating, right? And it's fascinating from an animal behavior standpoint, but where people took it to from there and why it applies to anything we care about is what's truly fascinating. And that is this. Later in psychology, people took the same work and tried to see to what degree does it apply to humans? To what degree do things that we do unconsciously actually influence other people's behavior? Right? And when this was applied inside of schools, they found that if a teacher was told someone was a bad student, they would unconsciously do things that would reinforce poor behavior in that student and lead to them performing more poorly. This has led to changes in education where when teachers get into a negative mindset about students, they have support mechanisms to help them get out of that so they don't inadvertently cause poor performance on the part of their students. Inside of research, this has led to the double-blind study approach because when they told researchers with rats in a maze, this group of rats has been bred for generations to be smart and be able to handle mazes quickly. This group of rats over here, they've been bred for generations to be stupid and really have a hard time with mazes. They would find that this would play out in the results, even though this wasn't true. There was no difference in the rats being used, but you'd see a statistically relevant difference in their ability to handle the maze based on subconscious things the researchers were doing in the conducting of the experiment. So this led to a double-blind study where we took away these preconceptions of what the study was trying to accomplish or what the study was trying to learn from the researchers so that they didn't accidentally influence it, even though they were really trying not to, right? So what can we learn from Clever Hans? What can we take back to our work? I want you to think about 3 different things. First, when you go and you work with a team or you work with an individual, what are some of the assumptions you're bringing in, right? And have you considered whether those assumptions, we all have some. Do you have ways to account for them, to counteract them? And are they assumptions that even if they influence what you're doing, they're positive assumptions that at the worst you're going to influence in a beneficial direction? So that's the first thing. The second thing, do you have people who you can share thoughts and assumptions with, share observations with, so they can challenge assumptions that you don't even realize that you're making? It's going to be really, really helpful to have that kind of support network. And maybe that's just if you're a Scrum Master, have another Scrum Master join you. Have another Scrum Master lead an event and you watch and see what's different, right? And then talk with them afterwards and see what those different perspectives are. And that third thing, do you have a support group or a support person who helps you when you get down, when you get negative, when you're looking at a team and just frustrated and I don't think they're going anywhere, and they can help bring that back up? That's not the same as people who will gripe with you, right? It's not the same as the people that you go and you have a beer and you say, oh my God, I'm so frustrated with them. And they say, I know I'm frustrated with my team too. They suck. That's reinforcing. That's not what you want, right? I mean, that may be cathartic and may be okay also, but do you have people that do the opposite? That when you say, these people suck, they help work you out of that mentality so you can return to the situation in a more positive way. If you address those 3 things, then you will be going a really long way to counteracting observer expectancy effect in coaching and leadership.